Drop it. I'm in a good, aggressive kind of mood because we got a bunch of bold progressives on the panel right here. Okay, Adam Green, everybody. Okay, Adam.
Where's my theme music?
I know, right?
What happened there?
Drop something.
Adam is, of course, leader of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, PCCC, and otherwise known as Bold Progressives. Check them out, boldprogressives.org. John Iadarola is the leader of Damage Report and many other things. And
like 30 things.
And we got a hell of a show for you guys today.
Can we just acknowledge something off the bat?
Go.
That I accidentally got Adam McKay's invitation, and when I accepted it, they fit me in here today.
Well, there's a lot of Adams.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But I also do want to start the show by just thanking Sean Baird, TYT member who bought TYT memberships for the entire Progressive Change Campaign Committee staff as part of the amplification fundraiser you guys did. So thank you, Sean, for amplifying TYT's voice and helping us integrate it, our entire staff, into our activism.
That's awesome. I love that, and I love that you called that out. I didn't know you were going to do that. That's fantastic. Thank you, Sean, on behalf of all of us. Okay, and we got a ton of show for you guys tonight, and a ton of show as always. But let me explain. Yesterday was our 17th anniversary, and so we have gone back to a 3-hour show. And so it's a little similar to what we're doing, but I want an important clarification here, okay? Because we are on many, many different platforms, including television, WRNN in New York, WMDE in Washington. So those folks are still getting the normal 2-hour show, 7 to 9 p.m. And there are different places where we're on different hours. But if you're watching live on our website, tyt.com, we're going to 3 hours every day. So on a Friday, what's happening is we got the normal 2 hours that we normally do with all the stories and not guests. We got guest hosts like Adam, etc. But we don't normally do guests. But the hour in a normal episode is the third hour is going to be guests plus members only for half an hour, right? On Fridays, you're getting a whole hour of members only. So everybody check that out. And of course, if you want to become a member, tyt.com/join, that'd be great. And on Tuesday, Senator Elizabeth Warren in the studio.
Dang.
So don't miss that. That's going to be great. Bernie Sanders was on yesterday, and Senator Warren will be on Tuesday. And this is exactly what we envisioned when we called this place Home of Progressives. So super looking forward to that. Okay, we got a ton of news for you guys, so I want to get right into it because Trump did an insane press conference. The theme of this show will be 25th Amendment. Okay, so John, take it away.
Yeah, I love that yesterday it was conservatives. Can you believe they're talking about the 25th Amendment? How dare you? And then he just starts babbling like a crazy person.
Yeah.
But they'll still believe it. Okay, also, super fast, I love the point that Donald Trump retweeted was Dershowitz saying, how dare they try to pull an unconstitutional move like using the 25th Amendment? And I just thought, I don't know if they know what the Constitution is or how that works. He really tweeted that, it's out there, go look.
Yeah, no, if you're like, the conservatives are honest, like, I don't get it, why is that?
That is
ironic?
almost anything could be unconstitutional except that. That's one of the only things that can't be unconstitutional, actually.
Because it's in the Constitution, it's the 25th Amendment, not of some other document, but of the Constitution. Yeah. Okay, but anyway.
Okay, with that, news that I came in this morning to the press conference, so I've been fired up all day. Okay, so let's start with the news. Earlier today, Donald Trump declared a national emergency that totally exists and totally needed to be called. And the reason he did that was that he did not get nearly as much funding as he wanted during the recent bipartisan congressional negotiations. That funding, $1.375 billion, only advocated enough funding for 55 miles of steel bollard fencing. Now he wants far more than that, and we quickly found out that they would be taking literally billions of dollars from other uses, including $2.5 billion from the Department of Defense's counter-drug efforts, which I would just like to acknowledge is ironic that they're building a wall to keep drugs out of the country. It's not gonna keep drugs out of the country, but to build it, they're gonna take money from efforts to stop drugs from coming to the country. They certainly have irony on their side here, as well as billions of dollars of military construction funds that I guess were just lying around, leading one to believe that perhaps we're putting too much money in the military. But in any event, he's gonna take all of that money. Now, we've been sort of anticipating this, and we know that if he tries to declare a national emergency, there are gonna be challenges to it very quickly. So, in presenting his argument as to why he needed to do this, he needs to choose his words very carefully. Let's see if he can manage it.
I want to do it faster. I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster. And I don't have to do it for the election. I've already done a lot of wall for the election, 2020. And the only reason we're up here talking about this is because of the election.
He just says the quiet part out loud constantly. There's like 3 issues with that.
Yeah, saying I don't need to do it kind of defies the point of an emergency. In fact, George Conway, husband of Kellyanne Conway, tweeted, "This quote should be the first sentence of the first paragraph of every complaint filed this afternoon." And Crew, that is the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, did just that. Hours after that press conference, they filed a lawsuit, and they have, of course, cited that as well. And they said because the government has so far failed to explain why the wall could be considered a national emergency, especially given that Donald Trump just said it wasn't.
Not since Donald Trump told Lester Holt that he fired Comey because of Russia has he made this big a fumble in public on camera. So we'll see if there's any accountability for it.
Omar Jadwat, director of ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project, just simply tweeted, "Keep talking, Mr. President."
Yeah, and then on top of that, there's him admitting that the wall that he's already built was just for the election. It's just so, like, he reveals a lot, then he lies about a lot. He said at one point in there, right now we're building a ton of wall. There's no active construction on the wall right now. It's simply a lie, and he would know that. But this is what we've come to expect out of this. So, look, obviously that was a gigantic fumble. It was immediately all over the place, and so Sarah Huckabee Sanders has the job put to her to respond to these concerns.
Critics of his seizing on this line that I didn't need to do this in regards to the national emergency, and some saying that that will be the opening line of every legal complaint that goes forward. How will you deal with that as press secretary?
Look, I think the biggest thing is that he shouldn't have to do this. Congress should have stepped up and done their jobs and done everything necessary to fully and safely secure the border. The president could have waited and he could have drugged this out. The bill allows for 55 new miles of wall, which is a great step forward, and it is certainly a down payment on the wall, but it doesn't finish the job. He doesn't want to drag this out over the course of the next several years. He wants to get the funding now so we can stop this national security and humanitarian crisis at the border.
So that, of course, is not an answer to the question.
Yes, in fact, it is digs her even deeper into that hole because she says Congress should have done this and they didn't, so now the president is doing it. Well, that shows you that it's not a national emergency. He just doesn't like the way that our government is formed. Congress appropriates money. They actively chose not to appropriate any more money for the wall, and he doesn't like our system of government. He says, I just want to go around Congress. That doesn't help your argument at all. It definitely hurts your argument because you're admitting that you're subverting Congress rather than dealing with an actual emergency.
So we're gonna get to one of the odder points in the press conference in just a second, but we're talking here about, he's fumbling the rollout of all this, and that's important, but let's also just stop and sort of zoom out a bit. He is declaring a national emergency that basically everyone agrees does not actually exist because he doesn't like what Congress has done. He wants to take billions of dollars away from disaster relief for California and Puerto Rico. How worried should we be about the precedent that is being set? And by that, I don't necessarily mean will someday a Democratic president get to also declare a national emergency. I mean, this guy who we know admires dictators around the globe is gonna talk extremely approvingly about expanding our death penalty laws to incorporate more nonviolent offenses, is using a fake national emergency to gain more power.
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on that because on the one hand, it's super important that we follow the Constitution, obviously, and we on the left actually deeply respect it. And so I don't want, like if we had a progressive president and he's like, well, I didn't like that Congress didn't pass, you name it, right? $15 minimum wage. They made it $13. I'm just gonna make it $15 instead. No, you don't get to do that. I don't care how much I'm in favor of $15 minimum wage. That's just not within the powers of the president. So you have to respect our form of government and the Constitution. Now, on the other hand, there are real emergencies coming. And this has been used 31 times before. When Trump says it's been used a lot, that's actually somewhat true. And that's been used 31 times since 1976 when the law was passed. And so now what was it used for? Actual emergencies like 9/11, Bush used it for 9/11, swine flu, that's what Obama used it for, etc. Could you make an argument that the planet melting in 12 years and then by that time 10 years is a national emergency and an international emergency? Certainly a way, way, way better argument than you could make that immigration that's at the same levels or lower is somehow a magical emergency all of a sudden. And if the Republicans want to open a door, if I was counseling a progressive president, I would say, don't walk through that door, run through that door. If it's a real emergency, and not just to subvert the will of Congress.
Yeah, climate. The day after the Parkland anniversary, guns. There are some real crises out there that certainly are bigger than this. One thing I'm watching is just what Republicans will do in the next few days. You've said this show many times. What does Mitch McConnell care about? Number one, power.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And he knows that this is subtly taking away his power and Congress's power. He doesn't like that, but he needs to hold his tongue for a couple days until this is signed into law. There's a fascinating dynamic right now where everybody's shutting up, but I hope, and I would even predict that some Republicans will start dripping out criticism of this, and that would even aid the lawsuits coming up in the near future.
Yeah, and by the way, if the Republicans do not overturn this, because they can, Congress could overturn this if they can get marshal up 2/3 of not only the House but the Senate. That's very unlikely, but if they don't and Mitch McConnell holds and says, yeah, this is a wonderful exercise of the president's constitutional powers, he will turn on a dime the minute there's a Democratic president and say it's the most unconstitutional thing he's ever seen. He lies for a living, he does it. People get on Trump, rightfully so, for being a pathological liar. But Mitch McConnell, if you look at his record of massive, overwhelming hypocrisy, is not that much better. Yeah. I guarantee you, he will tell bald-faced lies and on this issue and say, well, I was never for this use of constitutional power, but that's okay, we have him on tape.
Yeah.
So now the Democrats usually don't fight that much, so they're like, oh, didn't they kind of say that? And then they're like backpedal out of the room. But if we got a real fighter that's the president, do a press conference. Here is Mitch McConnell saying this is a good use of the president's power. Thank you very much, Mitch. Obviously, if he says otherwise, can we all agree? Can every reporter in this room agree that Mitch McConnell is an obvious liar and a hypocrite? If he is, that's okay. That's okay. But here's the evidence, and it is indisputable.
Yeah, I'm still worried. I guess I'm talking mainly about for the next 2 years, or as we get closer to the next presidential election. So he had unified government for the first 2 years. We have had the Democratic control of the House for like 6 weeks now. He has once been challenged on this issue, and he's declaring a national emergency over it. And after engaging in a shutdown that made him look awful, he lost in that. So he went through the shutdown and lost. He deployed his proxies in Congress and has lost. And so the first time in his presidency that he's really being challenged by the opposition party, his first instinct, or I guess second instinct, is checks and balances, national emergency. So what happens the next time he's challenged, or the third time he's challenged?
Well, this is why the lawsuit is so important. I'll tell you, back in the early days of 2017, the moment where I went from complete insanity in those first few weeks of the Trump administration to a little bit less insanity was when the Muslim ban happened. I was thinking, he's not gonna obey a court order. And then the courts came in and cooler heads prevailed, and he actually obeyed it. I was like, all right, there is some semblance of checks and balances, even though he's nuts. And we need to win this court case. Yeah. We need to box him in affirmatively.
Yeah, 100% agree. I thought the same exact thing. I was on pins and needles. Is he going to listen to the courts, or are we immediately in a constitutional crisis?
Yeah.
So, John, it's a great point. I mean, first reaction now that there's an actual check to him is shut down the government. Second reaction is shut down the Constitution. And so those are not good instincts, and this is why we were worried that he's authoritarian and has clear, obvious fascist tendencies. And if you let him get away with it, that is exactly how fascists take hold. They slowly strip away the institutions of democracy until the only thing left is authoritarian power. Yeah. So we must fight that. We fight it through the courts, we fight it politically, and we fight in every way that we can, and also rhetorically, and pointing out obviously, that he just admitted himself that there was no national emergency. So I know that his followers don't care about facts. That's well established. But for the rest of us, facts still matter.
Yeah. Let's turn to something just a little bit fun. Donald Trump knows that this national emergency is going to be challenged, and he has a pretty good idea of how that will play out in terms of the sort of order of events. He will now present it to you, and to make it easier to follow, he's going to sing it.
How can you guarantee to military families and to our men and women of the military that none of the money that would be reprogrammed to a wall will take away from other?
As soon as I get into the Oval Office, and we will have a national emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there, and we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court, just like the ban. They sued us in the Ninth Circuit, and we lost, and then we lost in the appellate division, and then we went to the Supreme Court, and we won. And it was very interesting.
Yeah, I thought children's songs were better when I was young, I think.
He reminds me constantly of a wrestler. And so what are the wrestlers do? They hype things up, and there's a lot of finger pointing, and I'm gonna crush you, and you're the worst, etc. And he reminded me of Ric Flair there, like, woo!
Every
That's the
world
whole
leader,
thing, yeah.
every world leader is seeing that, laughing at us, crying with us. That's just embarrassment.
Yeah.
It's an embarrassment. I can't believe that's our president.
Yeah, absolutely absurd. The things that people will just casually let him get away with. Let's move to one other area. Obviously, the funds are going to be taken from some areas, put into this new use for the wall. Some of that money coming from the military, which traditionally Republicans would pretend that they are big fans of. Let's see if that bears out.
How can you guarantee to military families and to our men and women of the military that none of the money that would be reprogrammed to a wall will take away from other technology, other renovations, construction that is desperately needed in our military?
So, John, we had certain funds that are being used at the discretion of generals, at the discretion of the military. Some of them haven't been allocated yet, and some of the generals think that this is more important. I was speaking to a couple of them. They think this is far more important than what they were going to use it for. I said, what were you going to use it for? And I won't go into details, but didn't sound too important to me.
Okay, so yes, based on my experience watching generals and how jealously they guard the money they've been given, often they'll say, your use is better. Yeah, go make your wall.
That's what the Pentagon is known for. Like, nah, we don't really need the money. Why don't you guys keep it instead? And I know generals are always coming in to areas that they have no expertise in. Now remember, there are military, they act abroad, right? And so they cannot act within the country in a police force, in a police role, I should say, right? So that's the law of the United States. So it would be incredibly unusual for a general to walk into the Oval Office and be like, hey, I got a great idea on how to use the wall to protect people inside the country, et cetera. And we didn't really need the $3.6 billion. And I was thinking, where should I put it? And I was thinking of doing this giant Valentine's Day shindig at the Pentagon. And I thought, no, I got an idea. Let's use it as a, come on, no, everybody knows that conversation didn't happen, right? Everybody knows that he's like, I'm just gonna take that from the military, and who cares? I already gave them a lot of money, and it's all politics anyway. They don't really need that, it's just defense contractors, I'll just take it.
But doesn't it give literal meaning to the Department of Defense? That was a bad pun, sorry. Okay, never mind.
Oh yeah.
There we go, we can fix that in editing. We'll find it. This isn't live, is it? No.
It took like a minute for me to get it, but it reminded me of those football games where they have defense.
Exactly.
Yeah, they'd buy those signs, but they can't afford it anymore. Right. Look, either that money was just laying around and they weren't going to use it for anything, or they were, in which case, then the question that was put to him was, how can you guarantee that this won't harm either the service members or their families? Well, that's billions of dollars that hypothetically was going to be used for literally military construction. I don't think that many of the people, remember, regular members of the service are not particularly well paid. Their families are not rolling in money. The idea that money that hypothetically could have gone to, places on bases where they would live, things like that, is instead going to be rusting at the southern border. I don't think that's going to reassure many family members of the military.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot because they always hide behind the troops. And they say, oh, you got to support the troops. No, the troops actually, they're for most of them, entrance level or entry level salary is a little over $19,000. They're not getting the money. The defense contractors are getting the money. So if you really want to help the troops, take the $3.6 billion that was apparently lying around that you weren't doing anything with, and give it all in salary increases to the troops. Do you have any idea how popular that would be? A, among the troops, and B, among the rest of the country. And do you know how much more popular that it would be than the stupid wall that only about a third of the country wants? So there's 1,000 better uses. But I mean, to John's point earlier in the show, the core of the argument is, hey, we really need this wall because it's really dangerous, and so it's about national security, and that's why it's a national emergency. Trump is saying, and one of the things he's doing is taking away from the military, which presumably would make us less secure. And the other thing is from $2.5 billion from the Department of Defense's counter-drug activities. But you told me that you're so worried about all the drugs that are coming across the border, and that's part of why you're doing this. So are you worried about security? Are you worried about drugs? Or are you only worried about your own political career?
And let's go one step further. If you're going to address an actual crisis with military funding, you'll recall that the very first week of the Trump administration, the military came into his office and said, here are the top 10 genuine national security crises facing the US. Number one on that list, climate change, right? Yeah. So use it for the actual crisis if you're gonna use it. Not even on the top 10, immigration or wall-related stuff.
Yeah.
So just, farce on top of farce on top of farce.
So, but the generals came in and told me I need it for the wall. No, they told you the exact opposite, literally.
Well, we're going to return to a few more of his theories about things like drugs, how he would like to deal with that, and stuff like that. But first, let's talk a little bit about the response. Some representatives in Congress, as well as congressional leadership, have responded to the declaration of a national emergency, with Representative Joaquin Castro saying, if President Trump declares a national emergency to fund his border wall, I'm prepared to introduce a resolution to terminate the president's emergency declaration. So that is a bill that we should probably expect in the near future. New Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also said, Joaquin Castro and I aren't going to let the president declare a fake national emergency without a fight. And though we've already talked about how high of a bar you would have to pass to be able to overturn something like this, that is a fight that at least some in the House are apparently willing to engage in.
Yeah, so they would need, ultimately, obviously Trump wouldn't agree, 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to agree. Now there are a lot of Republicans, or some Republicans, who say they're concerned. On the other hand, Jeff Flake and Bob Corker told us they were concerned till they were blue in the face, and then they voted with Trump almost every time. So we'll see if Marco Rubio's concern turns into a vote against Trump. But can you really get enough Republicans in the Senate to turn so that you can get 2/3 of the Senate? Unlikely, but it is important for Congress to assert its role, and it's important for the Democrats to do their job and their constitutional duties. So that is exactly what they're doing here.
Yeah, and I would also say, we have, earlier this week, Mitch McConnell thought he'd come up with this clever idea where he would try to put Senate Democrats on the record on the Green New Deal, because that would embarrass them. They'd be scared off from voting for one of the most popular policies going around the country. Well, if they do choose to have these votes, if Joaquin and some co-sponsor in the Senate has it, then a bunch of Republicans get to go on the record saying, you know what, I am in favor of allowing the president to declare national emergencies when there's no empirical evidence behind them.
And that's right. And in a scenario where a progressive president comes in, there's actual national emergencies, although the Republicans do not agree to facts, we could use those votes and go, hey, you voted for a national emergency. So it's definitely a great idea.
Yeah, we also have a comment from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who says, the president's actions clearly violate the Congress's exclusive power of the purse, which our founders enshrined in the Constitution. The Congress will defend our constitutional authorities in the Congress, in the courts, and in the public, using every remedy available. Now, we just less than a month ago gave Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer a lot of credit for what they did during the shutdown. What are your expectations for how far Nancy Pelosi is willing to go to try to stop this from happening?
Well, look, to be fair to her, I'm not sure that she can go much further than introducing it. They vote on it, it passes the House, and the rest, I guess, is going to have to be citizen groups that are suing and bringing it to the courts.
Well, she can also file a lawsuit, and some are saying that she should, on behalf of Congress, saying don't take away our power. I do want to put my finger on another dynamic that's happening with this resolution, which has to do with progressive power in Congress. So in the early days of this new Congress, there was a real risk that people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and others would be isolated from the rest of the Democratic caucus. We saw, we work a lot with Congress, and we saw the red to blue, kind of people that flipped red districts blue, folks becoming their own bloc and kind of pushing some of the blue district people to the side. And then Trump committed malpractice by doing the shutdown and uniting Democrats together. And you saw all these red to blue people being proud to march down the hall with Alexandria, in the Senate hallways, looking for Mitch McConnell, taking advantage of her bully pulpit, basking in the limelight with her. And it really built camaraderie and trust with among the caucus, right? Just this past week, the squad, Alexandria, Ayanna Presley, Rashida, and Ilhan, were again becoming isolated voices, saying we want to actually cut DHS funding, right? Cut money for this stuff. And they were only a few people on the sidelines. And now, because of this resolution, an aide today said, we've got people flooding in to support this resolution, meaning she is the tip of the spear uniting the caucus again. So Trump consistently is building her power when he doesn't mean to, which is great for long term for progressives.
Yeah.
And they're showing that it's not that hard to fight. You can do it and you can win. For so long, Democrats have been afraid to fight Republicans, but what's gonna happen in the red districts or the purple districts? Just get into the fight and you'd be surprised how well you could do. Why do you think Ocasio-Cortez is so popular? Because she's in the fight. And now Ro Khanna's showing that you could win. They won on several different grounds, including the vote in Yemen. And look at these progressives that are now lions and leading right away. It's amazing what you could do if you just try.
I don't know. I read like a 5-tweet thread from Politico saying that secretly it's the moderate new representatives that are the most important.
Well, it is quite a secret.
I literally mean that. I saw that before I came on the show, but there has been that take like every 2 weeks since the election. And it's like, at some point, if you have to keep telling us how important they are, maybe they're not so important. I'm not saying that they can't do anything and they're welcome to support things like the Green New Deal, but if there's certain people who are out there proposing the ideas, fighting for them, changing the national conversation, at some point, Politico, it's not just that you're boosting people who are largely irrelevant, you are largely irrelevant. And it's not just Politico, it's a bunch of other outlets that want to convince you that all of these people who are helping to drive, I guess, the political evolution of the Democratic Party aren't secretly all that important. It's really these other people. Someday they're gonna make it. They're gonna make a big splash.
And think about, why would the press bother to take someone who's incredibly popular and constantly criticize them, and take people who are incredibly unpopular? I mean, or
not known.
Or not known.
Nothing against them.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I have things against them, but it's okay. It's okay. But they're not very popular. It's okay. And I'm glad that they're Democrats. I'm glad they're voting with us, and that's all wonderful. So when we have unity, that's great, right? But why is it the job of the press to try to build up these folks? I mean, so there is a bias there. There's a perspective there. Their perspective is the establishment is great. When are these progressives going to stop accomplishing all these things? Okay, and how can we secretly give credit to the conservative Democrats that didn't actually do it?
Yeah.
And that's a curious stance for a so-called journalism organization to have.
Yeah. Why don't we take our first break?
Yes. Oh, okay. Now, when we come back, you ain't saying nothing yet. Okay, we're just getting to crazy. Okay, so that was actually, I'm not kidding, that was relatively mild.
Except for the singing.
Okay, the singing, it was weird, but I think what's coming up next in the rest of the press conference is way over the top. All right, we'll do that when we return. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
And people said, Trump is crazy.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Let me read a bunch of comments for you guys. Danger Carlos Danger on Twitter says, the real national emergency is that Trump thinks a bruised ego and being insulted by Ann Coulter constitutes an emergency. Ando's Dan says, maybe it was the money found in the Pentagon's couch cushions. In a sense it was, and that gives you a sense of how bloated the Pentagon is. Jezabit says, on a day when there's another mass shooting in America, Trump announces a national emergency for money for a wall. Trump has got his priorities all wrong. That is clearly true. Aaron124us on YouTube Super Chat says, if you are old enough to vote, then you should be able to run for any office in government. Hint, hint, wink, wink, AOC 2020. Okay, just calm down. Okay? One thing at a time. She's doing wonderful work in Congress. We don't need to needlessly tackle the Constitution on this, okay?
She's been in elected office for like a fortnight.
Yes, yeah. So floss.
But the age limit in the Constitution is unconstitutional, I hear.
Yeah, well, okay. So, by the way, just on that real quick, although there was a good argument to be made to do a fun video about this, but there was conspiracy theories that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had already died.
Yeah.
Until she showed up at the Supreme Court today and said that rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated.
Cenk, that's where I have to disagree with you. They're not all convinced that she's back. I'm not even joking. I was curious. I was like, have they learned something? But no, there's still all these theories.
Yeah, they can't be dissuaded. If facts don't matter to them. Anyway, last one. Ojam from the members section says, I'm kind of liking Cenk's showmanship style of dealing with Republican hypocrisy more and more these days. First of all, thank you. I'm not quite sure what it means, but I like it. And he says, is this what we could expect from a Democratic president with Cenk as chief of staff?
I think he means your call for all of these press conferences where you effectively just rub their face in it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that would be fun.
Yeah. Your Ilhan Omar one was pretty notorious.
Let us whisper of a dream. No, we don't need to whisper of that. This is a perfectly great seat.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
More Insanities next. One of the issues with Trump declaring a national emergency over immigration is that the numbers don't actually bear out that there is any sort of national emergency. Obviously, the actual immigration numbers are down. Drugs, like 85% of them, if they pass over the border, pass through. Ports of entry, crime is down. Obviously, we know that crime actually conducted by those who are undocumented is at lower rates than native-born Americans. These are theoretically issues to someone trying to declare that there is an emergency in respect to immigration. And that did come up during his press conference with a couple of reporters getting into it with him about that. First, here is Jim Acosta.
You are presenting information about what's happening at the border, calling it an invasion, talking about women with duct tape over their mouths and so on. And yet there's a lot of reporting out there. There's a lot of crime data out there. There's a lot of Department of Homeland Security data out there that shows border crossings at a near record low. That shows undocumented immigrants committing crime at lower levels. That shows undocumented criminals or undocumented immigrants committing crime at lower levels than native-born Americans. What do you say to
you don't really believe that stat? Do you really believe that?
What do you? Well,
take a look at our federal prisons.
I believe in facts and statistics.
Okay,
and data,
any more? Quick, let's go.
Let me just ask you this: what do you say to your critics who say that you are creating a national emergency, that you're concocting a national emergency here in order to get your wall because you couldn't get it through other ways?
What do you think? Do you think I'm creating something? Ask these incredible women who lost their daughters and their sons. Okay? Because your question is a very political question because you have an agenda. You're CNN, you're fake news. You have an agenda. The numbers that you gave are wrong. Take a look at our federal prison population. See how many of them, percentage-wise, are illegal aliens. Just see. Go ahead and see. It's a fake question.
That was disgusting in so many different ways.
Yeah, he's just not telling the truth, as always. We've shown you those stats 1,000 times on this show. Undocumented immigrants commit crime at half the rate of natural-born citizens. The people who commit the crime the least are actually naturalized citizens. That would be me, not a big deal. Okay, committed at a quarter of the rate. So as a group, indisputably, the people who commit most crime out of those categories are natural-born American citizens. So that doesn't mean we should discriminate against them and build 1,000 walls within the country to protect ourselves from us. It just means that he's lying about the scale of the emergency and the actual facts that at play here. He's just, you don't really believe that, do you? Do you really believe facts when I'm here out doing propaganda? Do you really believe that? Yes, we do believe facts.
And well, I have to say, as much as I've been waging this fruitless campaign for multiple years to get people to hold on to the idea that reality is discernible and that the scientific method is useful and that we should care about whether what we believe is true or not, you also have the angel moms there. And I just feel awful about the entire situation because obviously these people have been through an unimaginable tragedy, which is true at the exact same time that it's true that Donald Trump is using them in the most callously political way that an individual can be used. He believes that nothing matters so long as there is someone who lost a child to an undocumented immigrant's violence within 100 yards of him. He is immune to any counter argument. And that's a strong emotional appeal when those people are right there and you can see in their face how terrible the experience they've been through was, but it does not change reality. It doesn't change what is true about the situation at the border.
But it does show some degree of political acumen because people are less convinced by stats and facts than they are by seeing people with their own eyes. So they see the angel moms and they go, how could they say that undocumented immigrants don't commit as much crime? I see the women right there, they lost their sons and daughters. Yes, but I can show you twice as many moms who lost sons and daughters to crime that was committed by people that were born here, that are American citizens, and so, but nobody ever does that press conference where they bring random people who were the victims of crime and go, see, there's twice as many of them. And so, and by the way, Trump is probably also a victim of his own demagoguery. Remember, he's not really bright enough to discern facts and reason and logic, etc. So there's some chance he genuinely, when he accosted Acosta, thought like, what are you, crazy? How could your stats be right when I see the moms right there? Because he's not really bright enough to figure out that distinction.
When you say people seeing it with their own eyes, I think we need to call out a certain degree of racism that was threaded in there for what it is. When he said, look at the prison population, look at the prison population. He was trying to conjure up this caricature of people in prison being black and brown people, right? Yeah. That's a dog whistle. It's not very subtle to his base that just needs to be called out. That being said, as someone among other people who thought a lot about what could be happening under this new Congress, a Green New Deal coming up for a vote, Medicare for All coming up for a vote, an anti-corruption bill coming up for a vote, he is unfortunately successfully dominating the agenda of the conversation in the opening months of the new Congress. Our message is not getting out except for Mitch McConnell potentially scheduling a vote on the Green New Deal. So I look at that and I'm just so depressed that there's not enough oxygen in the room for the stuff that we want to be talking about. And the fact that his poll numbers are going up right now says his strategy might be working a little bit with his base.
Well, ideally, Nancy Pelosi should be scheduling all sorts of votes regardless of what Donald Trump gets up to. I don't see any good reason why she would be so distracted.
Yeah, well, that's going
Doesn't
to be.
mean she won't be.
That's going to be a huge fight coming up over the next 2 years within the Democratic Party. But back to this, I mean, you want to talk about depressed? This guy's not mentally stable. Who goes in the middle of a person? He's the president. He's not some like 2-bit, lower level White House advisor that you're slightly embarrassed. Oh my God, how did he climb onto that stage? We got to get him out of here. But you're fake news and that's fake stories and everything is fake. Well, okay, give me a stat. Show me the numbers that we show all the time. Say anything, that's ridiculous. Of course, that's outrageous, okay? And you're CNN, you've got an agenda, okay? Look, you could make an intelligent argument and say, I believe this CNN has a liberal bias, and here's a couple of reasons why I believe that. Now, I don't believe that, but you can make a case. Conservatives make a case all the time. But going, you're fake news. It's fake politics. It's fake what kind of an imbecile does that? And he's our president, 25th Amendment.
This morning on the Damage Report, we did a story. I don't even like to mention the name of this outlet, but 70% of Republicans who supported Donald Trump at the 2016 election said that New York Times and Washington Post are generally untrustworthy, either slightly untrustworthy or very untrustworthy. That number is more than twice as high as the percentage you say that about InfoWars. They believe that it is a more open question. 30% of them aren't sure about InfoWars. Only 15% aren't sure about New York Times. So they think, maybe they're not so bad.
Look, I was unfortunate enough to watch a clip recently because of the characters that are involved. Anyway, they constantly, to this day, on that program, talk about how God has spoken to the host, or Jesus has spoken to the host, and told them to crush, destroy, eviscerate their opponents. And there's violent imagery. Like, so twice as many Republicans believe that God has spoken to Alex Jones and told him to crush or destroy or kill somebody, as much as people who believe the New York Times and Washington Post. That's what I'm telling you. Trump is just a symptom. The real problem is the entire Republican Party has lost its mind. The problem is the Republican voters. They can't say that on television because they're afraid of losing ratings. We can say that here, 70% of Republican voters, and that number holds throughout. Do you believe the FBI is involved in a giant conspiracy to undermine the president and everyone who works at the FBI is in cahoots, et cetera? About 70% of Republicans go, yeah, that makes sense, yep. Everybody in the FBI just waited for this one moment and they invented this story, et cetera. You've lost your minds. And so we've got a significant chunk of the audience, and I should say the voters, that are lunatics.
Yeah.
And they believe things that are not remotely true. And that's probably, by the way, it's not unique to America. Unfortunately, that's true in a lot of countries. But we have to get beyond that. Unfortunately, right now, they're running the asylum.
Well, why don't we transition to news about other countries, actually, from Donald Trump. To deal with the fictional national emergency at the border, Donald Trump wants to build a wall, but he does acknowledge that there are other ways of dealing with, for instance, drugs flowing into a country. He has been talking with leaders of countries like China, and he apparently has learned quite a bit from them.
Unifying crime reporting statistics, numbers from your own Border Patrol, numbers from this government show that the amount of illegal immigrants are down. There is not violence on the border, and that
there's
most
not violence on the
there's
border?
not as much violence
Oh, really?
as. Let me,
You had
wait a minute,
26 people
Let me finish the
killed.
question, please. Let me finish the question. I'm asking you to clarify where you get your numbers because.
Let's cue up the next one.
This is much tougher than our criminal list. Their criminal list, a drug dealer gets a thing called the death penalty. Our criminal list, a drug dealer gets a thing called, how about a fine? And when I asked President Xi, I said, you have a drug problem? No. I said, you have 1.4 billion people. What do you mean you have no drug problem? No, we don't have a drug problem. I said, why? Death penalty. We give death penalty to people that sell drugs. End of problem.
You might have heard a little bit of, I assume, what is supposed to be a stereotypical accent kicking in there a little bit. He dialed it back, thankfully, but he did speak as if this is not a human who is speaking to him. But that is once again, and if you're just tuning into American politics, this is something that has come up every few months or so, both that Donald Trump believes that drugs are literally the worst problem in the world, but also that the solution is to murder the people who sell them. And he admires the fact that in China, or especially under Duterte, that is just a thing that is done.
Yeah, we've had the death penalty in this country for decades. It hasn't solved anything. And Saudi Arabia has a death penalty. It hasn't solved anything over there either. It's maniacal. It's again not detached. It's not attached to facts. He doesn't care about facts. All he cares about is evoking certain emotions. And so remember, the conservative mind is generally fearful. I did a story yesterday about how it's actually often triggered by disgust, that emotion of disgust. And so he knows those things. So he says, the incoming immigrants are an infestation, and they're not part of, and they're going to affect our national health. These are triggers, right? So in this case, oh my God, the drugs are so terrible, and the answer would be death penalty. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to feel like vengeance, and it's, oh, thank God somebody's going to protect me by murdering people.
Yeah, and he's in charge, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Why don't we take our last break of the hour and come back? We actually have a little bit of good news on foreign policy.
Yes, shockingly good news all of a sudden appears, and it is to check Donald Trump and murderous actions that unfortunately the United States is involved in. We'll be right back.